Welcome to the second episode in our Code Leaders podcast series. Today we have Mike Smith. Mike's the VP of Infrastructure over at Lumar, and is currently heading up a team of DevOps engineers over in the company. How's it going, Mike?
Yeah, going really well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thank you. And thanks for coming on to the podcast. Definitely felt like your journey was a really good example of somebody who's took the helm into taking on a leadership position essentially, as well as I imagine sort of maintaining that like hands-on element initially as well. So I think firstly, I was just really keen to understand, what was your journey into that sort of leadership management route? I know everybody is different. Was it like always the plan for yourself?
No, it was never the plan, to be honest. I didn't really want management or leadership originally. I always wanted to stay on the tools, as it were. But when I first joined Lumar, I was the first DevOps through the door, as I worked with the CEO at the time. I'd worked with him previously, so he then brought me in to help them sort out a few issues they had. And then, the benefits of working in sort of like a startup at the time was that I could implement a lot of stuff very quickly, and I got to sort of build out things and the processes as I saw fit, which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed sort of that hands-on and being on the ground doing everything. And then as the team started to grow, it's kind of a little bit, I didn't want to relinquish control, as it were. Well, not really control, but I enjoyed being able to influence the way things went and the direction we took. So then as the team started to grow, I then spoke to the CTO at the time and just basically said, look, I'm interested in stepping up and taking on a team lead role so I can carry on sort of influencing the way things were happening. And
Yeah.
then, that just snowballed.
Yeah, no, and that's what can happen, isn't it, in a startup sort of environment where there's more of that opportunity. And do you feel like that startup environment is something that's like influenced your approaches and I guess like your journey into that than say if you work for like a much larger corporation?
Yeah, massively. So early on in my first role, I was a developer for a startup, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed sort of like the atmosphere, the culture. From there, I went on to a slightly bigger company, which still had managed to retain its sort of like small company feel, even though it had 1,000 employees. And then from there, I went into a corporate, and I really didn't do well in the corporate. I didn't enjoy like the political side of things. Like you could be working on a project, and then someone had a game of golf, and all of a sudden the requirements change, and I really didn't enjoy that. So then I stepped away from that and went back into sort of like small startups and, well, not small startups, but smaller companies. Then I met the CEO of Lumar and worked with him on a previous project, and he pulled me into Lumar.
Yeah, great. And then like your role at Lumar as well, it's been sort of like relatively unique, I guess, because I know sort of your team has a bit of a focus on like having that almost coding element to DevOps as well. And I know it was sometimes like a bit of a niche skill set to hire for. So I imagine that's also sort of then like fed into having like a big emphasis on upskilling and training into that sort of position. Would you say that's fair to say?
Yeah, we didn't take the typical route. So we adopted AWS CDK when it was in an alpha stage. Reason being is most of our application is written in TypeScript, so we have a load of TypeScript developers, and being able to do the infrastructure as code, the whole pipeline and everything in TypeScript was really appealing to us. Terraform was obviously the popular choice, but that comes with some pros and cons as well. And we decided we would go as far as we could with CDK and trying to get to a place where developers were kind of self-serving, so we could provide them a sort of like a library, a wrapper, and then they could build their own infrastructure. So when I got DevOps teams come in, they needed to be able to learn TypeScript and then start packaging libraries, which isn't typical. Well, definitely wasn't typical of the role back then, but it's worked quite well for us.
Yeah, and like how is that like your approach to that training and mentoring then? So I'd imagine that is quite a different skill set, isn't it, to your typical DevOps engineer? And I know it's something that you probably look for in individuals, but not everybody's the finished article, are they, coming in? Like how have
No.
you found sort of finding that training and upskilling?
So finding people with, finding DevOps engineers with TypeScript experience is very, very, very limited. So we knew that was the case, and we've always looked for people with just sort of like a keen interest in development or building out their software skills. So we weren't looking necessarily they had to have this experience. We were happy for them to be competent in Python, for example. And
Hmm.
if they were competent in Python, then we could upskill them into TypeScript. We'd spend a bit of time with them and bring them up to our level. It's been quite an easy process, to be honest. There's nothing we haven't hit any like brick walls where we've had to completely stop and restart.
Yeah, well, that's ideal then. And like that, what's mostly been remote environment, hasn't it, for quite a while at Lumar? Like, how have you found that leading and that leadership aspect to your role in that remote environment? Has that changed the way you sort of approach things, would you say?
I wouldn't say it's changed too much because, admittedly, I never really wanted to go down this route. So my sort of managerial style has been more hands off.
Hmm.
I like to at least have. Well, I try to keep my hand on the code, but it's getting less and less these days, unfortunately. So I found a lot of it was more having trust in the staff that you've hired, and I was very fortunate in the teams that I built were just fantastic, very skilled engineers that have built out things in their own way. Um, so we've had engineers who've come out and implemented libraries that they implemented them 4 or 5 years ago, and they're still in use today, and they're pretty similar to how they were originally. So it was having the trust in the team to do the right thing, and yeah, also being remote was heavily leaning on that flexibility side of things, and just having that trust in the team to say, okay, well, you can sort of work the hours that you need to work. So if you need to go out and do things like that, that's absolutely fine. We don't expect you at your desk day in, day out, but you just have to put in some extra effort to building the rapport with the team. So most of the guys I had when we went into lockdown, I already knew, so that rapport was there. But then when you've got new guys coming on, you have to work a bit harder to bring that into bring that trust
Hmm.
into the game. And I think that was just more just doing the rituals and things like that, like the agile rituals, the stand ups and things like that. Just trying to make sure there's also always a personal element in there, so it was fun and you got to see their characters come out over camera and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's the tough part, isn't it? As you imagine, like, yeah, people who you already know, that I can imagine that would be a lot easier to maintain that trust, and knowing that you set them on a task and they're going to complete it, I guess. But then people like you haven't met before, I can imagine it's a completely different kettle of fish. And you mentioned that camaraderie there and like building that team together. Like, is that how what sort of styles do you take to that in that remote environment? Like, what are your approaches in building that?
So there's a few things we used to do. Just sort of on a Friday, we would have a drink session. Would finish an hour early and just sit there on uh, Google Hangouts. Would sit there for an hour and just kind of shoot the breeze, just talk about whatever we wanted to do, what we were doing at the weekend, and it was always kind of like work stop, tools are down, and just have that time where you get to know each other.
Hmm.
That was really useful. One thing we also done, a lot of us like gaming, so we have weekly gaming sessions, which are still going to this day,
Nice.
um, which is really nice. So we carve out like a 30-minute window once a week, just go and kill some aliens,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
just little things like that really go a long way because you get to play games with people you're not necessarily working with day to day, and then you kind of build that relationship via other means, which then when you do need to work with them, you already know them, you know what they're like, and it's so much easier just to get the work done quickly.
Yeah. Nice. What games are you playing out of interest?
At the minute, we're playing a game called Dark Tide, which is it's based. I'm not really familiar with Warhammer, but it's based on Warhammer, and it's basically a horde game. So you've just got hordes of aliens coming at you, and it's a hack and slash and shoot and lots of gore, and it's quite funny because it's fairly difficult as well. So 50% of the time we lose, 50% of the times we win. So it's quite fun in that
Yeah,
respect.
brings out that team camaraderie then, I guess, in a sense. And like your sort of role now, I guess, is taking on obviously stepping into that like VP, almost like strategic level that you stepped into. Like what, how do you balance that, I guess, with your own personal and team productivity? Is that something that you found like relatively um, simple, or is it something that has been quite a tough process?
That's quite a tough process because so I've done DevOps for years and years and years, and I'm now having to step away from that. And Geardrus has actually now stepped up to be team lead.
Hmm.
So it's and really, I think the hardest bit for me was trying to step away because I was being more of a hindrance than a help.
Yeah,
So I wanted to be able to do projects and I wanted to be able to do tasks and keep my hands on things, but I was doing compliance audits and stuff like that. So I was just slowing up the process. I found the best way I can actually help is stepping away a lot more and just letting Geardrus take the reins. And then I just have catch ups with Geardrus to see the direction they're going. And the stuff he's built out recently has been fantastic.
yeah, I think that's from speaking to a lot of people in who have made that step and progressed through that, almost like that willingness to let it go and yeah, like have that trust in, this isn't actually, I'm going to trust that other person to do that and step into that role. Whereas your natural instinct is to jump in and be hands on and take ownership of it. And
Yeah.
yeah, like that's that next step and that natural progression, I guess, isn't it? Which is sometimes really tough. And like, would you say, obviously, that startup environment, particularly, like, how important would you say, like, adaptability has been in taking that step into your leadership journey?
I would say massively. Sort of one of the things I think it's taught me is to learn quickly when you're wrong and not just sort of hold on to something for the sake of it. But if you're wrong, just say, okay, well, that was the wrong direction. Let's change our course and head down this way and get it fixed.
Yeah. Okay. So like willingness to accept and learn and learn from mistakes
Yeah.
and then take that into your work moving forwards. Well, yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
that's
We always try to fail fast, which is kind of sort of like the industry term is just failing fast and adapting to that.
yeah, definitely. And I think just having those points to your experience is really beneficial, isn't it? To know what's gone wrong in the past and then make sure that doesn't happen again and take that into future
Yeah.
projects. And I guess sort of your journey then, like stepping into that startup and progressing through the ranks, like for anybody who's watching this and is yourself like 4 or 5 years ago, who maybe wants to take that move into leadership or is something that's been thrust on them, what would you give as advice to sort of get going into that?
Oh, that's a good question. I think when you take on a role as like within the leadership, you kind of have a expectation of yourself to always you always want to know the answer when people come to you with things because you're a leader, so you're meant to take direction. You're meant to be able to lead this team, but being able to lean on your team for suggestions and for when things go wrong, go back to the team and say, "Look, how would you have done this? How can we approach this problem?" Is possibly the best advice I can give. Is lean on the team that you build.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, I think that's some really good advice for people to take forwards. But yeah, Mike, I really appreciate you taking the time to take this on. Yeah, I think you've had a really great career so far, and yeah, I think it'll be some really useful insight for those watching. So thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've definitely been very fortunate in my career.
No, yeah, no, no, definitely. I think you're being too modest there. But yeah, no, appreciate it, Mike. Have a great rest of the week.
You too. Cheers, Marcus.
Lovely.